prepared, but then I saw the Rav today and I said halacha. He said no, better on the parsha, so I changed it. So a famous question to ask on this parasha is: the Torah introduces Avraham Avinu at 75 years old, and out of nowhere Hashem tells him Lech Lecha. That's the first nivuah we see that Hashem gives to Avraham. And why is it that it doesn't talk about his whole early childhood, his life? You know, in yeshiva, some of the most, in Hinuch, the most memorable stories are the stories of Avraham Avinu that we get in the Midrashim. Chachamim have to come and fill in the gap of this long lost history of 75 years of who is Avraham, what made Avraham who he was. Right? We have, at least Noah, he talked about, he was the Tzaddik, Tamim, D'chule. You know, Moshe Rabbeinu, we start out from his early childhood, being built to Teva, how he was saved, growing up in the house of Paro. But how come by Avraham Avinu, it doesn't say anything? So, I think there's a very deep yesod of why the Torah specifically starts off with Lech Lecha, and that's it, without leaving the entire history of Avraham Avinu. And however, the answer is very dynamic. We're going to see two different schools of thoughts, how they could perhaps interpret this she'elah. So, Sefer Kuzari, from Rabbi Levi, he writes, very interesting, he says, Avraham Avinu, in the Midrashim, actually, you know, before we get to this, for those who don't know the Midrashim, we'll just reiterate a few of them. For example, the famous Midrash, when Avraham Avinu, when he was very young, he started contemplating and rationalizing and philosophizing. Why is the world, you know, being run? How is it being run? Who's running it? And the Chachamim in the Midrash give a mashal that there was a person walking by and he saw a castle, and in the castle he saw the lights on, and he says, "Is anybody there? Does anybody own it? Somebody there?" And out of nowhere, somebody pops up. The owner says, "Yes, I'm here." So the Nimshal is that we're telling us is that Avraham Avinu was thinking about what's going on with this world. Who's the manhig? Who's the one controlling it? And then he came to this enlightenment that it must be Hashem running the world. So already at a young age, Avraham Avinu, he came to this knowledge. And then later on in his life, we have the famous story that everybody knows and they teach them in school, is that Avraham Avinu's father, Terach, was a Oved Avodah Zarah. And in his shop, he had an idol shop, the best of the best idol shop. And one time he had to leave, and he put Avraham Avinu in charge. And when Avraham Avinu was in charge, people would come in, and he would try to, dissuade them from getting these idols. You know, if there was an older person that came in, he would ask him, "How old are you?" He was 50 years old. "I'm 60 years old." He says, "You're 50 years old, you're 60 years old, and you want to buy an idol that was just made yesterday, 2 days ago? And then, his father would lose business. Another funny story that the Midrash Rabbi brings down is that when Avraham Avinu, he was also in charge of the store, a lady came in and she says, probably she wanted to do some segula and bring a korban of flour to the idols. And when she brought this korban, so Avraham Avinu, what he did, something very clever, is he took like a stick and he smashed all the idols. And then at the end, he put the flour in the last standing idol with the stick. And then his father, Terach, comes in and says, "What happened? What did you do, Avraham Avinu?" He says, what did I do? The idols, they were all fighting. They were hungry. They wanted to take this korban. So they're fighting. And this one, the strongest one with the stick, he broke all of them. And that's what happened. And then Terach says, "Avram, I'm not stupid. They don't talk." So Avram says, "Exactly. So why do you believe in these things?" So then the Midrash goes even further that Terach was so upset, furious at Avraham Avinu, he took him to Nimrod. And with Nimrod, Nimrod tried to persuade him to also do Avodah Zarah. And Avraham Avinu was doing all these clever and being a smart owl with him. And in the end, Nimrod's like, "Okay, I'm going to throw you into the fire, and let's see if your God is going to save you." And his brother Haran was there as well. And Haran, he said, "You know what?" In his mind, he was thinking, says the Midrash, if Avraham is saved, then I'm going to say I'm on Avraham's side. I also believe like Avraham. If he's not saved, then I'm going to say, I believe like you, Nimrod. I believe in all this Avodah Zarah. So Avraham was saved, and that's happened, and he didn't get hurt by fire. But Terach, after he was thrown, Haran was thrown into the fire afterwards, and a miracle didn't happen, and he got burned from inside, the Midrash says. And this is the history of Avraham Avinu. Again, these are such fundamentals of Yahadut, of Judaism, to be, what is it to be an Ivri? It's because of Avraham. He's our forefather. Every time we daven in the Amidah, we're saying Avraham Avinu. We don't mention Moshe. But with Avraham, we don't know anything about his life, his early life in the Torah. Only the Chachamim have to fill it in. So going back to the Kuzari, the Kuzari, he says something very fascinating. He says Avraham Avinu, once he became in touch with Hashem, meaning he started getting Nevuah, and he came to this realization, really to this parasha where he fully became a Navi, he quit all of the philosophy, all of the rationalizing. He didn't need that anymore. And therefore, that was he tossed it into the bin, and now he became like a Hasid, a very, clean Tamim with Emunah Pishuta with Hashem. And it's a fascinating observation because if you look at it from this point onwards, through the Torah and even Chazal, all we focus on in the Torah, in this parasha, in the upcoming parashiot, is Avraham, his nisayon, his test that he had to go through, right? Chachamim tells us that he had 10 tests, and it's the Machlokei Rishonim how to count these tests. Which one? Rashi has a shita, Rambam has everybody has their own shita of how to count these tests. That means there were tons of tribulations that he had to go through. And so you see that the focus of Avraham Avinu was no more. We don't care. The Torah doesn't, or Chachamim either. They don't care about this philosophical achievements he got to understand Hashem, who he was. Rather, we just care about the fact that he was obedient to Hashem. He followed Hashem in the test he needed to pass and do. So that's one approach, perhaps. Why is it that Torah starts with Lech Lecha? Because according to the Kuzari, which he brings as proof, he's saying, we don't care about philosophy anymore. Once you have Yediyah, pure Yediyah, because you have Nevuah, which is the highest level, you have direct connection to Hashem, everything else is down the drain and that's it. However, on the opposite spectrum, you have the Rambam. The Rambam, very interesting, he says, he starts off the Mishnah Torah, Yesod HaYesodot and Amud HaChachmot, the pillar of all things is Lidah. He says to know Hashem. To know Hashem. And what does it mean to know Hashem? He doesn't even talk about La'amin, to believe in Hashem. He says to know Hashem. Right? So what does it mean to know Hashem? Actually, even in Sefer HaMitzvot, it was written in Arabic. Right? And there, it's funny, if you read a lot of the Girsel that we have here, they translate it to the word Ittikad. Who knows Arabic here? Rabbi Hassan? No? Ittikad. Yeah. You don't learn Arabic here? So Ittikad, what does Ittikad mean? Ittikad means Lidah, to know. But they actually translate it, if you look in the Sefer HaMitzvot, they say La'amin. But it's not Ittikad, I checked it with a few Arabic speakers, it means to know. So he holds, it's all about knowing Hashem. And not only that, he talks about how you can get your knowledge of Hashem, and he brings down sciences and all these things. And then on top of it, he brings down in the Mishnah Torah, which is a book of pure halacha, pure halacha, he brings down in Ilchot Avodah Zarah, Avodah Kochavim, he brings down the entire story of Avraham Avinu. In the first parak of Avodah Zarah, he brings the entire story of Avraham Avinu. How he was, at a young age, he actually brings a little some Aristotle twist to it, of how Avraham Avinu was looking at the Galgalim, at these spheres moving, and he's saying, who's the one that's moving these spheres? And therefore he came to this intellect at a young age of when he was weaned already to know who Hashem was. And so the Rambam, he's bringing these as, he's filling in the gap, saying that these are important things, so much so bringing it in a halachic sefer, which is very interesting. So the Rambam, he brings in Moreh Nevuchim, he says, and perhaps this is how we can answer the question, is that why is it that the Torah focuses on all these other things? These, he doesn't talk about Lech Lecha, but I'm putting this in. The Rambam has a very important yesod. He says is that the Torah is for the Hamonei Ha'am, it's for the people. And most people cannot grasp or come to the grasp of the proper, realization of who Hashem is on their own. They can't come to that reality and truth on their own. They need to have revelation. They need to have the Torah to come and give over something in order to guide you. And then once a person gets to this level of knowing Hashem, now you can use that as a springboard, pretty much as a means to meet the end, which is actually Lidah, to know Hashem. So he's not throwing away the Yeda of Hashem, knowledge of Hashem, philosophizing Hashem. He's telling you, for the Hamoneham, for most people, you need to have this. And then once you have the mitzvot and the commandments and the obedience to Hashem, you use that as a platform to grow more on your individual level of knowing Hashem. And therefore, according to the Rambam, we understand why it starts with Lech Lecha, and we don't care about the other stuff in the beginning. Because according to the Rambam, this is what the Torah is all about, giving you the basic platform for everybody. And then now, of course, Avraham Avinu, he knew Hashem, it's so important, we have to know, I'll tell you about his stories, and he got to this level. But the Torah is focusing now on the future of the Jewish people as a nation, on a national basic level. And that's why it starts with Lech Lecha according to the Rambam. And now some interesting nafkaminot that we have from these two approaches. There's a lot of interesting nafkaminot. So for one of them, for example, the Rambam in Hilchot Teshuvah. Actually, before this we'll start. In Hilchot Me'ilah, the Rambam talks about how it's so important that a person has to try to understand each and every mitzvah. Don't just take it for granted and be, I'm obedient and that's it. In Me'ilah, he talks that every person has to go and try to figure out the reason, the ta'ameh dikra, the ta'ameh of the reasons of the psukim. And after you look at Kuzari, he actually says you shouldn't do that. It's all about, for the Kuzari, it's all about obedience. Obedience, we don't care. There's actually two different schools of thoughts of what a chok is. Right? We all know in yeshiva, they teach us what a chok is. A chok is something that you can't ever figure out, right? That's what Rashi says. The chok, we don't understand the reason. The Rambam in Mar Nevuchim, he says a chok, you can understand the reason. It's just harder to get there. But the Rambam holds that you can understand a chok. So there's two different perspectives of the mitzvot, of what it's about. Is it just pure obedience, or is it obedience with trying to get a little higher in the knowledge and the reason of this divine, commandments of Hashem? Another interesting nafkamina, you see that in Hilchot Teshuvah, in the fifth parak, in the fifth halacha, the Rambam, he talks about something that is philosophically a question that is perplexing, that people can answer. He says that Hashem knows the future of every person, what we're going to do. So if he knows the future of what we're going to do, then how do we have bichira? How do we have free will? Right? It's a very interesting, basic question you have to ask. If we have free will, then how can he know what we're going to do? That sounds like we don't have free will. And the truth is, it's a circle, says the Rambam, and we can't figure it out. He says, we are humans, we're limited in this knowledge, and we can't figure this out. And therefore, according to the Rambam, he's saying, listen, I'm trying to, we have to ask the deep questions that we can ask and try to arrive to them, but sometimes there's a human limitation that we can't figure out. Whereas you open up the Ravad, the Ravid on the spot, he says, the Rambam, why did you open up your mouth? Why did you even talk about this? If we can't understand this and you don't even have an answer, better keep your mouth shut. He uses very strong lashon on the Rambam. So you see the Ravid is saying, the approach of the Ravid is saying, you don't have to get into this philosophical thinking and inquire about these things. Keep it, emunah pshuta. Don't get so complex with this. Another very interesting machloket you have is in the third parak of Hilchot Teshuvah, where the Rambam talks about that anybody who believes that Hashem is a guf or any physicality, he doesn't have any portion in the next world. The Rambam is very strong lashon, very strong language on this. However, you look at the Ravid there, and usually a lot of people don't know about this Ravid. The Ravid says, how could the Rambam say this? There were greater people than you that believed that Hashem had a body. So the Rabbi is saying that there were certain people in Europe at the time, Rishonim, Gedolei Rishonim, that believed that Hashem actually had a physical body. They believed that Hashem had a physical body. And he said, even though the Ra'avad, he says, I don't agree with that, but they made a mistake because the way that Pesukim are in the Torah, it sounds like that Hashem does have a body. If you just read the simple text. If you read the simple Midrashim, you read the simple, open up the Gemara, it does sound like it's telling you that Hashem does have a body. And therefore you can't blame them for making that mistake. So from this machloket, you see a very deep machloket that according to the Rambam, it's all about Yedah. You have to know Hashem. And therefore, if you believe he has a physical body, that means you made such a mistake and you went off the path completely that all the mitzvot that were there to elevate you to a certain level, you lost the whole point of it. However, according to the Rabbi, he's saying this is the mitzvot. It's not about the knowledge and philosophy of the Torah, what's important. It's about doing what obedience is the most important thing. And therefore, you have Chachamim, some of them that believe that Hashem had a body. I hold that they made a mistake, but no big deal. They still have a chelik le'olam haba. So you see this crazy machloket, very polarizing machloket between two different schools of thought. So just to kind of end it off, is that what do we do now, right? This is a safek deoraita, it's a safek. What is the purpose of the mitzvot? What is the purpose of the Torah? And both have an answer of how you understand Lech Lecha, why it starts off with this pasuk, and for it doesn't talk about the stories of Avraham Avinu, his early childhood. So nowadays the approach we have, and I think this is the approach that most people have, is that we try to make a synthesis of both approaches and try to make shalom between them. So nowadays nobody believes Hashem is a body. Baruch Hashem, we came to this realization that it doesn't work philosophically, it just can't be. But at the same time, we're not trying to rationalize everything and be a little too crazy in that aspect as well. But if you want to, no problem, you can. But at the same time, we learn Sefer Kuzari. We learn these things, and obedience is a beautiful thing. And having emunah pshuta is a beautiful thing. So we try to take both things to the best of our ability and make shalom with them.